All right, good evening, everybody. Tonight is May 15th. It is 7 p.m. This is a meeting of Troy City Council. And tonight, before I start anything, please silence your cell phones and any other electronic devices that you might have out there so we don't have interruptions later. Tonight's meeting will be started by Councilman Rozelle with the invocation and then the Pledge of Allegiance. Would you all please stand?
Oh God, we thank you for the blessings that you have bestowed upon our community. Grant us unity and discernment as we discuss the vitally important issues facing our community. O Father of justice, let integrity and humility be our guideposts for each one of the leaders gathered here tonight. With the advent of the summer, keep us mindful of the blessings of friendship, good memories, and the opportunity that comes with each new day. All these we ask, O Lord, in your mighty name. Amen.
Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Knight, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Whidden.
Here.
Mr. Sievert.
Present.
Mr. Rozelle.
Here.
Mr. Pierce.
Present.
Mrs. Marshall.
Here.
Mr. Schilling.
Present.
Mr. Phillips.
Here.
Mrs. Sneed. Mr. Twist.
Move to excuse Mrs. Sneed.
We have a motion by Mr. Schilling and a second by Mr. Whidden to excuse Mrs. Snee. Mrs. Knight, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Sievert.
Yes.
Mr. Rozelle.
Yes.
Mr. Pierce.
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall.
Yes.
Mr. Schilling.
Yes.
Mr. Phillips.
Yes.
Mr. Whidden.
Yes.
Mrs. Snee is excused.
Move to excuse Mr. Twist.
Second. We have a motion by Mr. Schilling and a second by Mr. Pierce to excuse Mr. Twist. Mrs. Knight, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Rozelle.
Yes.
Mr. Pierce.
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall.
Yes.
Mr. Schilling.
Yes.
Mr. Phillips.
Yes.
Mr. Whidden.
Yes.
Mr. Sievert.
Yes.
Mr. Twist is excused.
Thank you. Mrs. Knight, would you now read a summary of the minutes of the May 1, 2023 meeting?
Minutes of Council, May 1, 2023. Public hearing was held on ordinance number 021, 2023. Committee reports. Community and Economic Development Committee supported the recommendation of the Planning Commission and recommended legislation be prepared to vacate a small parcel of right-of-way at West Main and South Stanfield. Community Partnerships Committee recommended legislation be prepared authorizing the agreement and notwithstanding legislation for the 2023 Troy Strawberry Festival and also for the temporary activation of part of the Dora temporary activation boundary. Finance Committee recommended legislation be prepared to provide a loan, CDBG EDRLF loan to A.M. Scott Distillery, LLC. Law and Ordinance Committee reported regarding a TREX application, and there was a motion to approve the TREX application for Aldi's. Recreation and Parks Committee recommended legislation be prepared for a building lease and ground lease with Busted Brick Realty for the property known as the Mayflower Building. Resolution number R30, 2023, loan to A.M. Scott Distillery, first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 02123, a rezoning, public hearing and second reading. Ordinance number 022, 2023, vacate parcel of right-of-way, southwest corner, West Main, South Stanfield, first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 02323, an agreement notwithstanding regarding the Strawberry Festival, first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 024, 2023, using a parcel of the designated outdoor refreshment area for the Strawberry Festival was given first reading and was adopted. Ordinance number 025, 2023, leasing a portion of Prouty Plaza and 9 West Main Street to Busted Brick Realty was given first reading and adopted. Council adjourned into executive session and then adjourned at 8:45 p.m.
Move to adopt.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rozelle and a second by Mr. Pierce to approve the minutes as read. Mrs. Knight, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Rozelle?
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
We're moving into committee reports right now, and first we'll have any citizens' comments on any of the items that are on our agenda this evening. If anyone would like to come up and speak on any of the items, please do so. You have 2 minutes, and Mr. Kerber will be our time.
No, that's after the...
I'm sorry, you words. Delay that. We'll put it after the committee reports. I don't know how many times I've done that. First committee report will be the Buildings and Utilities Committee, and that will be presented by Chairman Christy Marshall.
Thank you. All right, committee members Wynn and Marshall met May 8th to consider the request to authorize 2 professional services agreements with the firm of Jones and Henry Engineers Limited of Cincinnati, Ohio, related to projects at the water treatment plant. The projects are explained in detail in the detailed report. It is the recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety to enter into professional services agreement with Jones and Henry Engineers Limited of Cincinnati, Ohio, for the following design projects. Chlorine gas conversion project for the water treatment plant at a cost not to exceed $226,430, Valve replacement project for the water treatment plant at a cost not to exceed $120,310. Respectfully submitted by Mr. Whidden and myself as chair.
Thank you. Any council folks have any comments or questions on this item? Okay. Moving along to the Community and Economic Development Committee and the chairman, Mr. Schilling.
Thank you. The committee met on May 8th to review the recommendation of the Troy Planning Commission that 16 South Oxford Street, parcel number D08001120, be rezoned from B2 General Business District to OR1 Office Residential District. This committee supports the recommendation of the Troy Planning Commission regarding this proposed rezoning and recommends that council adopt ordinance number 021-2023. And this is respectfully submitted by Mr. Pierce, Mrs. Snee, and myself, Jeff Schilling, as chair.
Thank you.
Did he say 15 or 16? What was your address, Jeff?
15 South Oxford.
I have 16 South Oxford.
I know, 15's on the agenda.
15.
Well, again, lighting, I'm sorry, it is 15.
Okay.
I'll amend that.
We're good.
Do you need these?
No, I need light on this thing over here.
Any other comments or questions on this committee report? Seeing none, we'll move along to the Streets and Sidewalks Committee, and that is my committee. This committee met on May 8th to consider the ordinance of assessment for Phase 14 of the Sidewalk Improvement Program. The Phase 14 work has been completed for the area described in the detailed report. No objections were received from the recently published notice. The next step of the process is for council to enact the ordinance of assessment, and it is the recommendation of the committee that legislation be prepared authorizing the final assessment for Phase 14 of the Sidewalk Improvement Program. Committee member Snee will recuse herself from the recommendation as she is a property owner within Phase 14. And this is respectfully submitted by Mr. Pierce, Mrs. Snee, and myself as chair. Are there any comments or questions on this item? Seeing none. Second item from the Streets and Sidewalks Committee, we also met on May 8th to consider an assessment agreement with Busted Brick Realty Group, LLC, for an encroachment into the right-of-way of North Cherry Street. The building known as the Mayflower Art Theater is being redeveloped, and the owner wishes to construct an exterior staircase from the North Cherry Street side of the building, as easement agreement is needed as the staircase will encroach into the public right-of-way. It was and is the recommendation of the committee that legislation be prepared authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety to enter into an easement agreement with Busted Brick Realty Group, LLC, related to an encroachment into the public right-of-way of North Cherry Street, so that the redevelopment of this building can continue without delay. Committee does support emergency legislation, and this is respectfully submitted by Mr. Pierce, Mrs. Snee, and myself as chair. Any comments or questions on this item? Okay. Seeing none now, we will move into citizen comments on any of the items that we have on the agenda this evening. Again, you have 2 2 minutes as your time limit, and Mr. Kerber is our timekeeper. If anybody would like to address anything, please come up to the podium, state your name and address, and give us your comments. Okay, seeing none, we'll move along into resolutions. Mrs. Knight, would you please read Resolution R31, 2023?
Resolution number R31, 2023. Resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio, to enter into an agreement for professional services with Jones and Henry Engineers, Ltd. of Cincinnati, Ohio, for design services for the chlorine gas conversion project at the water treatment plant at a cost, this will be at a cost not to exceed $226,430, first reading.
Move to suspend.
Second.
We have a motion to suspend from Mr. Whidden and a second by Mr. Pierce for the resolution. Mrs. Knight, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Move to adopt. Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Sievert and a second by Mr. Schilling to adopt the resolution. Mrs. Knight, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Thank you. Mrs. Knight, would you please read Resolution R32, 2023?
Resolution number R32, 2023, resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio, to enter into an agreement for professional services with Jones and Henry Engineers, Ltd. of Cincinnati, Ohio, for design services for the valve replacement project at the water treatment plant of the City of Troy, Ohio, cost not to exceed $120,310, first reading.
Move to suspend.
Second.
We have a motion to suspend by Mr. Whidden and a second by Mr. Schilling. Mrs. Knight, would you please call the roll?
I'm sorry, I did not get to make this.
Mr. Whidden and
Thank
Mr.
you.
Schilling.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
We have another motion by Mr. Whidden and a second by Mr. Schilling to adopt the resolution. Mrs. Knight, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
We move into the ordinances. Mrs. Knight, would you please read ordinance number O21, 2023?
Ordinance number O21, 2023. An ordinance changing the zoning of parcel number DO8001120 in the city of Troy, Ohio from B2 General Business District to OR1 Office Residential District. This has been recommended for approval by the Troy Planning Commission, address of 15 South Oxford Street. This is the third reading.
You just need a motion to adopt.
Need a motion to adopt. Move to adopt. Second.
We have a motion to adopt by Mr. Schilling and a second by Mr. Whidden. Mrs. Knight, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Thank you. Moving along to ordinance O26, 2023. Mrs. Knight.
Ordinance number O26, 2023, ordinance levying assessments for Phase 14 of the Sidewalk Improvement Program. This is the final step in this phase of the program. This is the first reading.
Move to suspend.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Schilling and a second by Mr. Whidden to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
We have a motion to adopt by Mr. Whidden and a second by Mr. Schilling to adopt the ordinance. Mrs. Knight, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Thank you. We're moving along to ordinance 027, 2023. Mrs. Knight, would you please recap that?
Ordinance number 027, 2023. Ordinance approving an easement agreement with Busted Brick Realty Group, LLC, an Ohio limited liability company, regarding an encroachment into the public right-of-way west of Inlet 37 into North Cherry Street in the city of Troy, Ohio.
Moves to suspend.
I'm sorry. And in the city of Troy, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
I'm sorry, I thought you were done. I
I
apologize
know,
for
it
that.
slid.
Move to suspend.
Now, your motion's going to stand?
Yeah, I'll stand.
Okay, and we do have the Schilling and Whidden team tonight with motion and second, so Mrs. Knight, would you please call the roll?
Makes it easier.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Okay. They switched it up on me, so it's Mr. Whidden with the motion to adopt and Mr. Pierce with the second. Mrs. Knight, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
And the last ordinance of the evening, Mrs. Knight, 028, 2023.
Ordinance number 028, 2023. An ordinance changing the zoning of 58.093 acres of in-lot 11550, parcel number D08 107-388, in the city of Troy, Ohio, from the Miami County zoning of A2 General Agricultural to the city zoning of R5 Single Family Residence District. This has been recommended for approval by the Troy Planning Commission. There'll be a public hearing at the next council meeting, and this is the first reading.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions on this by anybody? Okay. Moving along into communications and announcements. Mrs. Knight, do you have anything?
No, sir, I do not.
Wonderful. Mr. Lutz?
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. My only wish is that in a couple weeks, when we meet again, we can all look back with happy and fond memories on Memorial Day and the Troy Strawberry Festival.
Most excellent. Thank you, sir. Director of Public Service and Safety, Mark?
Just one thing regarding the dye mill compost facility. Starting June 1st, they will no longer accept concrete, bricks, and blocks. Grass, brush, leaves, trees, branches, rocks are still available.
Excellent.
Still drop this off.
Excellent. Thank you. Do you happen to know the cost of the mulch that we sell out there?
I don't know off the top of my head. I can tell you that the compost, leaf compost for Troy residents is $22.50
Okay. A yard?
per yard.
Did Patrick text you and tell you had to mention the dye mill facility is really my question?
Yes, he did.
Okay, because it's a...
4:30 a.m. in Japan when I got that.
It's every 2 weeks, we hear that.
Open for business.
Thank you, sir. Is that all?
That's all.
Thank you. Director of Law, Mr. Kerber.
I have nothing this evening, thank you.
Thank you, sir. And the auditor is not with us this evening, and tonight I have nothing to add. But do any council folks have anything to add or speak about this evening? No? Now, any staff in the audience have anything that they would like to report on? Okay. Any member of the audience out there tonight, now is the time for the free-for-all, so if you have anything to come up to the microphone, give us your name and address. Come on down. Your name and address, and let us know what's on your mind.
Good evening. My name is Deb Hogshead. I live at 421 South Plum Street here in Troy. On behalf of Move to Amend Miami County, I want to thank candidates who took time to respond to our survey ahead of the May 2nd primary. Our survey asked candidates to state their position on corporate power and money in politics. Of the 12 candidates surveyed, 6 responded. Thank you. We published responses in the April 16th edition of Miami Valley Today, on our Facebook page, and in a locally managed Google Doc. Supporters have been listed on Move to Amend's national website. Not every responder agreed with our position that an amendment to the U.S. Constitution, in particular the proposed We the People Amendment, is needed to rein in corporate power and regulate campaign spending. Those who disagreed with our position took time to provide thoughtful responses, and we thank you for those thoughtful responses. In the months ahead, our team will respond to concerns expressed by those who disagree with us, and we will continue to educate the public about the need for the We the People Amendment and explain what the amendment will and will not do. Also, I want to mention that May 10, 2023, marked the 137th anniversary of the Supreme Court's 1886 decision in Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad. This decision is often described as the birth of corporate personhood. Although the court did not explicitly rule on the question of corporate constitutional rights, a false, unofficial headnote or summary of the decision is credited with establishing the notion that a corporation has equal protection rights under the 14th Amendment. That's all I have for you tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else wish to come up and give us some wisdom? Okay. Seeing none, then our meeting is adjourned, and we will be back here next Monday for our committee reports, and the week after that will be our next council meeting of the month. So, thank you. I'm sorry.
Because that Memorial Day.
Memorial Day, I'm sorry. The Tuesday after that.
No, 3 weeks.
5 weeks.